Good morning, Joel.
Oh, good morning, Giselle. I'm glad it worked.
I'm so glad. That's why I'm here. I was telling others because uh, people like you have problems sometimes. So I'm so glad you're in.
Well, thank you.
How are
I'm
you?
here. I'm fine. Just finished my busy day, but it's okay.
Great. So I'm admitting CP David now. Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah, please take care of what you need to take care of.
No,
I'm here.
it's so nice. So you might say, "Good morning, CP." So let's.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, CP.
Hello, CP. I'm not sure if we've met before.
Hi. No, I've communicated with you recently, about your planned trip here. Kailan na ba yun,
Yeah.
Doc Joel?
Yeah, I know. But at this point, I don't know the answer yet because the
Okay.
university is still not allowing us to travel.
That's
But
true.
of course, it will happen.
Yeah. So yeah, Joel, you're not allowed to come here. I can imagine. A U.S.
Yeah.
advisory is not yet, right?
Right, but the university, of course, has its own policy, and of course, I'm under the policy of the university. But of course, they consider as well the recommendations by the State Department. That's what they go by.
That's right. But are you able to travel now to any other part of the world? No?
Me? No, not at
Oh,
all.
absolutely.
I'm completely grounded.
Well, at least like with your messages, like we're virtually traveling with you, right?
Yes. So,
Anyway,
but yeah, now Zoom is international, so
yeah, it's like
I conduct all the meetings internationally by Zoom. Yeah.
orders. Yeah. So I'm attending 12 midnight tomorrow or 12 noon in Maryland.
Yes.
It's in Hopkins. So it's by a guy whom I was going to collaborate with on plants with antioxidant properties. He's quite famous. Jed
Okay.
Fahey of Johns Hopkins. He's a biochemist.
Wonderful.
And he's
Yeah.
like this proponent of broccoli and now
Oh wow.
malunggay. Yeah, so he's giving a
Nice.
seminar and it's of course 12 midnight here and I just want to listen.
Sure.
Detoxification
Excellent.
for greater immunity, I guess, in this
Right.
time of COVID.
Wonderful.
Anyway, I
Yeah.
think our format today, so Chris Bernido is coming in now and we'll wait and it's perfect because I think CP after our panelists speak, we may open the floor, I think, to the persons who have been most active in this discussion. Okay, and it was triggered by Chris and Marie Vic's paper.
Right.
And then Joel had this voluminous, that's one of your favorite words. Joel, that's what I describe you, how I describe the voluminous. So anyway, yeah, so my
Goodness,
suggestion,
Hi,
Chris,
Chris.
is
Hi, sir.
I just give the introduction and I give the background. I'll say that it started because of this paper of Chris, and I
Right.
mentioned the most active discussions for this topic. And then, then I say, then this is a chance to just consult our, I wouldn't say elders, I'll think of a nicer word. Okay, and then the wise men, okay, I'll say wise, experienced men. And then I'll just hand it over to you, CP, and you introduce them. But
Mhm.
then I think before we start, you can read the guide questions. And well, it's up to you if you will mention that there is a like a tabulation of things that we sort of already know, but then we need to add to that. And what I sent you, Chris, is because you said I should do it, but Steve and I had actually planned that we should really do it. Otherwise, it's never gonna happen. Okay? No, and nobody will write it except maybe I don't know. Joel might write it, but Ernie, I talked to him yesterday after our Rec 13 economics meeting, which is very active. He said that he might ask one of our members, this, Sarah Dawa Yucanes, CPD, you know her?
No.
So she's our young faculty. She already has tenure. She did her,
In MSI?
no, economics, school of economics. Her
Okay.
summa cum laude, and then she did her PhD abroad. I'm not sure now if it's Florida or one of these universities. And then she's very outstanding, and she's our rec chair, co-chair. So Ernie says we might ask her and her husband Jeff Ducanes to do it. So that's our major, I think, task now. If we are to write a paper, Joel, Chris, I mean, unless you guys volunteer, we have to think of how to write it in a way that is, acceptable, palatable to our audience or to our target, recipients of this paper. So I think that's
The way I see it, Ma'am Giselle, is that we provide a draft.
Yes.
And if possible, we should keep it as short as possible.
Right.
And then with that draft, we circulate it
Exactly.
to Chris and Marivic, Doc Joel.
Core group, yes.
And bulk of the content, I would say, siguro sa introduction, we can say that the paper is in part, or for the most part of it, coming from this fireside chat that we will have today.
Okay, that's good.
Para kasama na yung input ng 5.
Oh yeah, so I have to take notes, but let me now.
I'll take notes also.
Yes, and then I just have to make sure it's being recorded. So it's being recorded, okay? So we can refer also to the recording. So Chris, what do you think? What is your idea about this? Of course, you're going to try to publish or circulate your paper. Now, what we're planning in PAASE is even maybe for a broader audience or for a targeted audience in government and the private sector. I already know, Joel, that Ernie Pernia and others will try to involve the private sector for funding it. So funding a human intelligence or human capital development fund. So Wilipid Padulina had suggested an intelligent fund or intelligence fund, right? But when we mentioned it to Ernie Pernia, he said maybe just a human capital development fund. And they think that it might be good to involve the private sector already as a form of.
Ma'am Ester.
Hi, Ma'am Esther.
Morning.
Ma'am Ester,
Hello.
hi.
Yon.
Good morning to you.
Good morning. Maaga kayo ah.
Kasi nga, kung minsan may problema pumasok sa Zoom.
Right.
So Joel has problems sometimes. So, we can't afford not to
Hindi.
get people
So
in.
if you give me the number, the ID and the password, that's the
Okay.
easiest way for me.
All right. I will, can I,
No, it's okay now. I mean to say we're already here. What I'm trying to say is that's normally the best way to get into Zoom.
that's right. So I thought
Kaysa yung
you might
link.
want to invite the
The link.
presidents. Is it too late to invite them? The women.
Wag na.
Huwag na. Oo,
Magulo.
magulo pa. Oo.
Oo.
Anyway,
Anyway,
Yeah, Caroline was present at the Fireside Chat one.
saka iba naman to eh. We are talking with the big guns here. So,
And
it's ang importante yung sina Father Ben, sina Emil, and so.
So, CP, Father Ben, I forgot, is saying mass kasi at 8 o'clock. 8 to 9. Kaya 9 pa lang siya mag-join.
Yeah.
So, we might play by ear if we're done with the first 3 speakers by say in by 8:40 or so.
Okay.
Then maybe do the Q&A. Okay. Okay.
Pwede.
Then we move to then that would be Paep and then Father Ben after that.
Or finish the 4 kasi baka naman
Begin,
will be waiting for an hour.
and then Father Ben afterwards na lang when he comes in. Sige.
Whenever he comes in.
Okay, so there are a few people, of course, that
I'm going to say this will last up to 10. Ganun ba yun?
yes.
Okay. Kasi meron alas 10 eh.
Oo. Yeah, then I think kasi from experience talagang kulang eh.
Oo, ang daming
For a big discussion. Okay? So anyway,
We'll keep the lecture siguro mga 10 to 12 minutes.
Yes, that's what I said.
From the 5 speakers. And then for those who want to comment afterwards, ang naisip ko is structure natin ang konti.
Yes, structure natin ang
and then so I'll start with maybe a general topic for us to discuss. And then all comments should be somehow related to that. If the first topic is kunyari developing our primary and secondary schools, no?
Yeah.
To shepherd them to a S&T career in college. Then we discuss that for 20 minutes and then move on to the next.
So people are coming in and I will be admitting. So now it's Paep and Emil Javier and Sean Raymundo is here. Good morning, everyone. Morning. President Javier, how are you? Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I think CP, you have to be quick about, just segueing from one topic to the other. But I want also a chance for Chris, Esther, Joel to speak. The major discussions in our email. And also if Arnel Salvador comes in, then please, let him, because he's one person who tells us that industry is hiring his master's and PhD graduates. The other person that I hope you could ask to speak is Dean Felino Ino Lansigan of Los Baños, because he has an experience, Joel, of having been a Rockwell, Fulbright, or Ford Scholar. Maybe this is during the time of President Emil Javier. They went to the States as a group. He went to Berkeley, and it was with a theme in mind. It's environment. It is already sustainability. And afterwards, all 7 of them came back to UPLB, and they set up SESAM. Okay, and he refused an admin position in the College of Arts and Sciences. He was being asked to become an administrator already, kasi PhD na, but he refused it. So I'm hoping that Dean Ino, former Dean, or Dean Ino Lansigan has a chance to speak. Okay, there are a few others, CP, who've been active in our discussion. So I think it's important.
If you want, Ma'am Giselle, right after our speakers, I can call on Joel or Chris to comment away. Para you can,
Because introduce them. I think I'll give the background and say, we resurrected or revived this because this. So Chris and then Joel and Esther shared the history of the SCEP, and then we have Al. So, yun. Good morning.
Hi, Al.
Good morning, guys. Hello.
Morning.
Good morning. Sorry, I rushed. Came back from my 1-hour run. I started too late.
Yeah. Okay.
Emil.
Okay.
Yan na si
Dr. Javier.
Hello.
And
Hello.
Dr.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Javier.
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning, Chris.
Morning po.
Good
Hi,
morning.
Chris.
Morning, Esther.
Puro coconut.
Coconut. Oh, maganda yung view niyan sa Los Baños.
Hindi, yun ang aking advocacy ngayon yung development of the coconut industry.
Sige ho, gagawa
Emil.
tayo ng ano dyan. Gagawa
Emil.
tayo ng
Ano?
mga mga insulation and soundproofing from cocoa fatty alcohols.
Fiberboard.
No, this one is a polyurethane substitute coming from CFA.
Okay.
There is such a proposal, President Javier, to prepare composite materials, nanomaterials, nanocrystalline materials, including from coconut husk, from abaca, and even from seaweed. So we prepared such a proposal. The major proponent is a chemist from UP Diliman Chemistry, and Gobet Advincula. It's one of our stalwart members. And he's already setting up an institute in DOST to do 3D printing and additive manufacturing, making use of these materials to add on to synthetic polymers. So yeah, very promising.
Sorry, Ma'am Giselle, quick question for Dr. Javier and PAEP. Meron ba kayong PowerPoint na i-share o wala naman?
Ako wala ako.
Okay,
But
sir.
I will address yung second guide question.
Okay.
Giselle.
Guide question. I sent it. If you want me to, can you screen share that? But you'll read it out, right?
Oh yeah, I'll just read it out and then I thought I'll address that among the 4 or 5 questions that you posed.
So
That's perfect. PAEP,
Good
how about
morning.
you, sir?
I don't have
PowerPoint ba
any
kayo?
PowerPoint to
Okay.
present.
Good morning, Pat. Good morning, Marivic. Nice to
Good
see
morning
you.
po. Good morning po. Hello.
Hi, Mary.
Ay, ito na si Ernie.
Morning.
CP, can you please
Good morning, Pat.
Good morning.
don't address me as ma'am, please.
Okay.
Hey, Ma'am Giselle, please. Just me, Giselle. Makes me feel old. Okay. Okay.
Ayaw tumanda.
All right. Yan na si Ernie. Si Ernie, ayan na.
Ernie is here.
All right. Si Sean nandun na rin. Gil Mendoza. Secretary, good morning.
Sean. Sean, how are you? We had a very lively discussion yesterday in the rec for education. And yeah, we're gonna ask the different recs or fields of science to produce 5-minute say videos, no? And we're going to try to support that with some funding. So Willie is coming in.
Okay, great.
We're
Morning. Good morning.
morning.
Morning po.
Naku, Ili.
Good morning.
Nandiyan na rin.
And if it's okay pala
Good
for our
morning.
speakers, I will do away with a lengthy introduction.
Oo, kilala naman
Para
natin
will-
na yung mga yan.
Sobrang haba ng mga CV ninyo eh.
Sikat naman.
Wag na.
Yun na
Ako
lang
lang,
nasa ilalim.
First star yan.
Yung nasa ilalim ng pangalan nila sa poster, pwede na yon. 2-liners, no? Oo.
Oo, one line nga lang yung ginawa ko. So,
Oo, tama na yan.
Hi Esther.
Hello, Emil. I thought tapos na tayo sa usapan na to. Hanggang ngayon, problema pa rin. Ganun ba?
Ay. I think
Walang katapusan.
Never.
So,
Never ending.
never ending. Same old problem.
New
It's getting
strategies,
worse.
though, new solutions.
I think
Getting worse.
everyone, I'd like to ask what we should say our end in goal is. End. Okay? End in mind, as Father Ben would put it. Ernie, Willie, Ernest, Javier, what would you like us to say? Are we writing a paper? We will give to some target audiences or offices.
Well, we need to...
Yes. So we will draft the paper So before you joined us, Joel, Chris, CP, and I were saying that we will draft a paper, and then we will send it to all you, the core group. We will incorporate the suggestions of our 5 speakers today, of course. But we came up with a tabulation of things that I gathered from your discussions, including National Business Plan for Higher Education, Joel. I think you mentioned that. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Giselle, if I may, I think what would be a practical deliverable would be a set of actionable objectives or goals. So something specific that can be acted on. I think that would be great.
So that's what I think I prepared what I thought were implementable actions. So
Yes,
actionable
yes.
objectives.
Sure, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we should go beyond support science, support education, and so on. We have to come up with specific implementable actions.
Thank you. Yes. So we're gonna put that table that I prepared in the Google Drive as a document that anybody can edit. You can add, what your comments. You can add to the list.
Actually, Giselle, as it is, marami na yon. So maybe a more important, well, I don't think, I'm not sure that's complete, but anyway, we really should prioritize those. Priority. Ano ang gagawin na ngayon and so on and so forth. Prioritize. Kasi as I keep saying, tambak na studies na tayo. Puro studies. And we always come up with the same conclusions.
Pero maganda, laging may fresh views.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. I'm not saying we should not bring in new ideas, especially because there are many young people now who are around and in fact, I'm really pleased na sabay-sabay yung mga sinasipi and the Padulina guys and children. And maraming UP faculty children na bumalik and they are contributing. So we really should listen also to them. But what I'm trying to say is priorities. We have to have some priorities, things that we can do, especially together with people like yung USAID Stride and so on. So sa akin yun ang dapat na patutunguhan ng discussions natin.
Okay. So far we're only 15 and it's already 8:05.
Right.
But we will start. If you don't mind, we will start. Sabi ka, pass on ko na nga ito kay CP, Ester, next generation. No? So
yeah, right.
So are we ready to start? Yes?
Yes. I just try to get...
Nenny, good morning.
Yeah, morning.
Okay. I'll be listening. I'll be here. Hello, Secretary Ernie.
Yeah. Hi, good morning.
Okay. So
I have two
meetings.
comments here.
So I'll just request everyone to mute now and except for the speaker. All of us will be muted. Okay? All right. So we'll start.
Yeah. Okay, good morning.
Okay, good morning. I'll just give
Sorry, Ma'am Sel, before we start, Sec Ernie, you
Yes.
may want to mute one of your devices na may feedback sa amin.
Yeah. Ano ba ito? Wait a second, because I opened my my iPhone and then because I had a problem with my iPad, but now the iPad is working, but I have to turn off my iPhone. But I need that.
In the meantime, I'd like to recognize, Arnel Salvador, Veronica Migo, and ilang pa lang tayo. Hill Mendoza. Hill is here. Hi, Hill. Okay. All right. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to PAASE Fireside Chat 2 on building a robust S&T capital for human, for economic recovery and resilience. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today to discuss this all-important overarching topic, okay, that has been the subject of many campaigns through the decades. Okay, and well, again, for a brief background, we have this chat today, and it's a burning issue. That's why it's a fireside chat. Because Chris and Marie Dick Pernido resurrected the topic with a well-written paper that they shared with us. And it elicited a lot of responses from our PAASE members. Okay, so among those who responded to them at great length with voluminous ideas, suggestions are Joel Cuello. Then there's well, Serafica. Ester Garcia traced the history of ESET from well, the 80s. And then we had Arnel Salvador with Greg Tangonan, Toby Dairit, and a few others in PAASE. Edsel Peña, our vice president, also gave comments. So we thought that the first thing we should do is to consult our wise academic leaders, wisdom gained from great experience leading our institutions, our academic and R&D institutions. So today, on behalf of my co-host and moderator, C.P. David, we are honored and feel grateful that we have 5 speakers to share their views, their thoughts on guide questions. We prepared either general guide questions, but we also prepared a table of implementable actions already based on what our PAASE members had shared with us. Our 5 speakers are Secretary Ernie Perna and her 4 honorary members. And I will now pass on the floor to CP, who will introduce them properly. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks, Ma'am Giselle. As you have mentioned, we have the most distinguished list of speakers this morning, as well as our colleagues and friends who have contributed to the overall idea of putting up a paper on S&T human capital development. Quick question, Ma'am Giselle, because one of our speakers, Father Nebres, is coming in at 9 a.m. What would be our sequence of presentations? Again, we start with Dr. Pernia, followed by
N.S. Javier.
Dr. Javier.
And then Dr. Javier.
Dr. Padolina.
Yes, and then Dr. Pascual.
Dr. Pascual, and then
yes.
Father Nebres.
Yeah, and then if it's not in yet, then Q&A first. Okay.
Yeah.
Then
okay. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you. So thank you again for joining our fireside chat this morning. As a matter of second introduction, but Ma'am Giselle already mentioned some of the key points that we want to tackle this morning. The way a nation develops its human capital actually defines the economic strategy the country will choose. Now, our strategy as a country has been at most, I would say, an opportunistic one, mainly relying on the demand coming from overseas. We've seen the increase in interest in school teachers when there was that demand, construction workers, then nursing, and then lately demand in the maritime industry. The S&T human capital development is nowhere to be found. All I know is that we, as part of the S&T sector, need to have a clear path in terms of developing human capital towards employment and towards economic recovery of the country. We'll start with a short lecture, a 10-minute lecture from Dr. Ernie Pernia, who is a professor of economics and former director general of NEDA. Dr. Pernia, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Just to refer again to Chris and Marivic's paper, in fact, I was the first one to comment. And what I said was, we should disseminate this widely, publicize it, but it has to be made more catchy in terms of the title of it, and also made the text should be made a little bit more legible, understandable to the general public, because it's really a very provocative paper. Anyway, this is about human capital development. And I think you'll agree with me that ideally, human capital development should be viewed as a life cycle ecosystem. We cannot just start injecting human capital at the PhD level or at the master's level. We have really to start from the beginning. And one of our major problems is the stunted children. And that is why early child development is very important, because these are the feeders. We start with children as feeders on going up the school ladder, basic education, higher education, and then postgraduate. So that would be the ideal way to look at it. And Ester Garcia earlier said that we should just focus on a few items, and I agree with her. And instead of redoing papers again over and over again, I would like to just hark back to the Philippine Development Plan 2017 to 2022, where human capital development is one of the central chapters, and also human capital development and the economy's growth potential, so that eventually we will be a globally competitive knowledge economy. So just to put in a very short phrase the objective of the Philippine Development Plan, it is laying the foundation for inclusive development towards a high trust, cohesive, and a globally competitive knowledge economy. So the question is how to achieve, how to move towards this goal. And I think the answer would be to ramp up investment in human capital with a human capital development fund, because we need a lot of funds to invest in human capital. As I've said, starting from early childhood through graduate school. And this human capital development plan, of course, has to be initiated by the government, but the government cannot do it alone, as has been demonstrated with the kind of budget the DOST is getting. Only about, for R&D, it's only about 0.15% of GDP. And so this human development fund should be enhanced with contributions from the private sector businesses. And these contributions from the private sector businesses can be incentivized by making them tax deductible, meaning those who contribute to the capital development fund, human capital development plan, will be getting tax deductions. That's a very you know, attractive incentive for them. So if we go to the Philippine Development Plan, in terms of the strategies, what the strategies we need to achieve this goal that I mentioned earlier, the strategies are, you know, we have 7 parts in the Philippine Development Plan, 4 of which are relevant to what we are going to be talking about. In part 2, part 2 talks about enhancing the social fabric, meaning strengthen solidarity, social solidarity. And there's a chapter there in this part 2, which talks about ensuring people-centered, clean and efficient governance, and also promoting Philippine culture and values. And then in part 3 talks about inequality reducing transformation. And in under this part 3 is chapter 10, accelerating human capital development. That's exactly what we are, this is exactly the main point of this fireside chat. But then we also need part 4, which is increasing the economy's growth potential. And for this, we have chapter 14, vigorously advancing science and technology and innovation. And then in part 6 is about foundations for sustainable development. And there is chapter 19, accelerating infrastructure development. And then chapter 20, ensuring ecological integrity, clean and healthy environment. I think these are really just some major themes or sub-themes toward human capital development. And I think the table provided by Giselle provides the very detailed instruments to, you know, each of these sub-themes. So that's all. That's about 10 minutes, I think. I consumed 10 minutes CP. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Pernia. I have a couple of questions I wrote down already for you, but I'll wait for the Q&A to get these questions. Thank you, Dr. Pernia. Let's move on so that we can cover more topics in a quicker manner. Our next speaker, obviously, again, needs no introduction, but he is a professor in plant genetics and former president of UP from 1993 to 1999. Let's please welcome national scientist Emil Q. Javier. The floor is yours, sir. Paki-unmute po.
Sorry. Good morning, fellow members of PAASE, of NAST, from academe, students, and friends. As started by Kenny Pernia, the matter of building human capital in S&T is a complex undertaking, and really it's an ecosystem with so many moving parts and so many people involved. Starting with basic education to undergraduate and graduate education, and finally, innovation and commercialization of technologies by industry. This morning, the 10 minutes I'm given, I will devote to addressing the second question, guide question posed by Gisela to us. Let me read this particular guide question as posed by Gisela. Governments typically are the catalyst in creating demand for enabling industries with high intellectual capital. So what are the concrete strategies that we may adopt to achieve this? My proposal is not a new one because it's, I think, a common knowledge. But the idea is, I think, among many others that we should do, we should adopt as an organizational strategy the establishment of mission-oriented multidisciplinary research centers in our universities. This is a common model in the US with the establishment of SMT parks in the university campuses. And among the best examples is the initiative of Frederick Terman in Stanford, an electrical engineer who was the mover in establishing an SMT park in Stanford, inviting industries to locate therein. And this effort by Terman really gave birth to the Silicon Valley concept. There are two elements here, mission-oriented and in the university. Because after all, to get public support from Congress, we have to relate those items of expenditures to the public good. And therefore, while it's very tempting to propose, say, the basic sciences as rightful and eligible targets of public support, we will be better off we present ourselves as people with a mission, with the intent of contributing to the attainment of national purposes. Okay, sorry. So the concept is what Terman called the steeples of academic excellence. Steeples of excellence meaning narrow heights, towers, but not ivory towers. As explained by the 11th president of Stanford, Mark Levin, Stanford is a purposeful university. Therefore, these steeples of excellence in the university in Stanford promote and celebrate academic excellence not as an end by itself, but as a means of further multiplying the benefits of its activities for society. This notion of mission-oriented centers in the university is not new. We had a number of them before, but I think we should revisit them. A quick look at our SNT horizon will show that, in fact, among the fields of science, agriculture in relative terms have received more public support over the years compared with the others. In fact, the surge of investments in higher education and research in agriculture occurred in the 1970s after the declaration of martial law, with establishment of UPLB, PCARD, Mariano Marcos State University, Central Luzon State University, VISCA, Central Mindanao, USM, and the component institutes therein, like IPB, National Crop Protection Center, Food Science Institute, Post-Harvest Technology Center, and so forth and so on. So in the 70s, there was a flush of investments by government. because it had, at that time, no less than President Marcos himself was interested in science and in agriculture in particular. And of course, he had a very aggressive Secretary of Agriculture by his side, Arturo Tanco. So over the years, we have established these centers, many of which are still functioning, although many have lost steam or lost ground after support for them dried up when our economy took a tailspin in the early 80s, which led to the EDSA and of course the assassination of Benigno Aquino. In Diliman, we have the Marine Science Institute, the National Institute of Physics, National Institute of Geology. These institutions have flourished in spite of the fact of relative neglect. So what remains now is for us to persuade Congress to really adopt an aggressive measure to expand support for these established centers of excellence in the university, not only in UP, but in private universities as well. But the problem of linking supply and demand must be addressed. Because even with these agricultural institutes that have been established, some of which are still flourishing today, the weakness had been up to this point is the lack of linkage with the private sector. And therefore the Terman model of steeples of excellence, where you invite the private sector to locate on the university campuses, is very, very valid. So my proposal is that among the measures that we are contemplating, I think we should push for a very deliberate, aggressive effort from Congress to support those centers of excellence in the universities, both public and private, as a means of really ramping up our human capital investment. At the same time, making sure that supply is linked with, effectively linked with demand by this transport model of Terman. So I think in that way, then we can really focus our efforts in certain institutions that will lead in our effort for human capital development. But this necessarily requires some degree of prioritization, as Ester Garcia was mentioning earlier, because the problem with this concept of center of excellence, which was started by UP, was adopted by CHED. But CHED now has more than 300 centers of excellence, and therefore it's inconceivable that we will have enough money to support all those 300 centers of excellence. In 1983, in my capacity as a minister at that time, I called the attention of Marcos to the number of research institutions that have been established for agriculture. I showed him a bar graph with so many institutes for agriculture. And now the health centers of Imelda, but I cited that there was only one for basic sciences, NSRC in Diliman. And so he asked me, what do you do? Then that's led to the signing of EO 889, the establishment of basic sciences in UP, which recognized the Department of Physics and elevated it to a national institute, as well as NIGS, NSRI, and institutes in Los Baños. They received substantial infusion of grants at the beginning, but later on the support waned But I think we could revisit those efforts because after all these years, even with very relatively moderate support, NIP, NIGS, and these institutions, including the Marine Science Institute, have proven that they can be worthy targets for public support. So my idea is for us to adopt a dedicated effort to establish mission-oriented multidisciplinary centers in the universities as a way of augmenting supply, but with the model of Silicon Valley, Stanford, relocating the private industry in the campuses to link these university centers of excellence with the needs of the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Javier. So far, for those who have just recently joined our Fireside chat, we've heard from Dr. Pernia about looking at human capital development by looking at it as part of a life cycle ecosystem, essentially looking at the supply side of S&T workers in the country. And then from Dr. Javier, he mentioned mainly the purpose of why we need to develop S&T workers. And that is, at least for one strategy, for us to be able to innovate and commercialize S&T research. And by linking the work done by S&T workers to the private sector. And so this will create that demand and hopefully break the chicken and egg problem of not having enough supply because there's no demand just yet. I see what Dr. Javier is saying, and that is that our universities need to transform in a way of being simply an academic institution as a training ground for the next generation professionals, but also, like what UP is doing, do more research and extension work, even at the university level, and ensure that we're not just teaching the next generation, but also contributing already in the knowledge gap that is required for our industries to further develop. So far we've heard two very short and very crisp presentations. We'll move on to our third presenter this morning. Dr. Willie Padolina was a professor of biotechnology in UPLB and was, of course, former DOST secretary. So please welcome academician Dr. William Padolina. The floor
Thank
is
you.
yours.
Thank you, CP, and good morning to you all. I don't know what else to add after listening to Secretary Pernia and President Javier, but I'd like to just share a few thoughts about what I think are very vital points to really consider. First is, I don't think there is any country in the world that can claim to have adequate numbers of S&T workers. And I'm saying that because, you know, for example, even some of our PAASE members are there in US or in other parts of the world because they have been able to really compete in the market. So what I'm saying is that maybe human development and retention programs must be competitive. We must compete in the market because otherwise we will continue to experience what I think is a market failure. Secondly, as Dr. Javier has mentioned, support in S&T is reversible. And it may be due to political circumstances or even the outputs of what he called the centers of excellence. There is obsolescence in human capital. And unless we replenish our workforce, our knowledge workers, this obsolescence can be a factor in our failure to respond to our societal interests. So let me just reiterate what I said. Human capital development and retention must be viewed in terms of a market, and that we must establish schemes that will make us competitive, because we will have to attract people here. And part of it may be niching, selecting priority areas where we think we will excel and that we can be considered one of the leading lights in that particular area in the global market. It's a global market. And unless we really awaken to that, I think it's going to be very difficult to get back our, what we call our 1950s stellar performance. In fact, if you've read the study by Yoshihara Kunio, he calls our development as technology-less. It's technology-less industrialization. So what do I propose? Let's go to the jugular. I think we might want to study the 1,000 Talents program of China, because what we have to really get back are talents. Whether they are Filipinos or foreigners, we will need them. The problems are piling up, and inequality is becoming more and more intense because we are unable to address these problems because of a very limited talent force. I think all of us here will agree that even if you ask for proposals, you will probably get the proposals from the same persons who have already been successful in getting grants, because the pool is just too narrow and too small. And what is the consequence? We are overburdened. And when you're overburdened, then, you know, something will have to give way. It's either problems that are important will not be addressed because you have to attend to one. For example, Boracay. We have more than one very nice tourist spots which are already deteriorating, but we're not able to address them because we don't have enough people. We can only address Boracay and then move to the next. By the time we move to the nth spot, it's already deteriorated and irreversible. We don't want that to happen. So let's go to the jugular. Let's get people in, because they are the ones that will provide the brain power to solve our problems, whether they be in private sector or whether they be in agriculture or manufacturing. Let's get them in, because otherwise the problems will really deteriorate to a degree where we will just all have to suffer. And I'm afraid we are seeing that already in the current pandemic. And unless we awaken to that reality, we will find it very, very difficult. We do have many areas where we could excel. In my view, there are many areas where we can excel. We just have to prioritize them. We have some areas where we have a critical mass of talents, but many others we are short of talents. For example, in the area of microbiology, there are only 8 HEIs offering this program. And now you can see how we are approaching the pandemic, which is caused by a microbe. Fundamental knowledge is not there. And maybe last point is that we need to attend to our national defense. I don't know how our academics will take it. There are people in our universities who do not want to engage in military research. But I think we have reached a point where we can no longer depend on visiting forces agreement, etc., that we have to brace up ourselves in terms of having this capacity. And unfortunately, some of the programs started earlier during the time of martial law were not continued. I refer to Project Santa Barbara, which could have really pushed us a little bit higher into the national defense scale, and also the reduction of the budget of the AFP R&D Center. I have been told that even our combat rations are imported. And that is a shame. I mean, why can't we put that together? Anyway, just back to my point, and let's go to the jugular. Let's bring people in to help solve our problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Padalina. I'll come back to you on some of the points that you mentioned. For example, national defense research, funding, and selecting priority areas. And so we'll revisit these topics during the Q&A. Thank you again. Moving on to our fourth speaker, Dr. Pascual is the president of the Institute of Corporate Directors and was the immediate past president of UP. Please welcome former President Alfredo Pascual. The floor is yours, sir.
Good morning. I think we've got a broad perspective that has been shared with us by Ernie initially when he talks about the life cycle approach to human capital development and the existence of a development strategy over the medium term and the long term. We've also heard about other ideas from President Emil and from Willie, the idea of centers of excellence or R&D institutes that are closely linked to universities and industry at the same time. And the idea of competitiveness. I'd like to share a few thoughts on some of this and add something from my own appreciation of the situation. I agree with the idea that we need competitiveness. I always believe that it's competitiveness that brings out the best in people. Now, with respect to bringing in experts, in the knowledge paper that we prepared when I was towards the tail end of my administration in UP, we said that we should bring in experts starting with our own Filipino scientists and technology experts now based abroad, and they could be attracted back, and that we should send selected highly qualified people to go for advanced education in the US. But while we're waiting to the return of people we send out for abroad for training abroad, I injected the idea of being open to bringing foreign experts to fill in the gap that Willie was referring to. There are experts. We lack in-depth experts, you know, in very important areas, and one area has already been highlighted by Willie. The other point I'd like to raise is we cannot talk of, it has already been mentioned, you know, of experts in S&T And without broadening or having a well-prepared base from which to draw the highly qualified experts. And I'm referring to the quality of our basic education, which has to be addressed first and foremost. When we talked of supporting industries, technology and knowledge industries, of course, we need the high experts, but there has to be a supply of technology workers as well, and where will they come from? We have very weak graduates from our basic education system, starting from weak elementary schooling and weak high school. And many of them eventually end up and unproductively occupy seats in our colleges and universities. The problem with our country is we're so oriented towards people eventually going to college. I thought we should have broken that kind of mindset when the senior high school level of basic education has been introduced, that it will be enough for people to get up to secondary education to be able to gain employment or to be able to market an expertise or a profession, not profession in the white collar sense, but as technical workers. But it's not coming out that way. When I was still active in industry, we tried to promote the idea of companies already revising their job description and not anymore requiring college education for certain jobs in factories and in offices. But it's turning out that the qualification is short, the requirements coming from among the graduates coming from senior high schools, for which we have a few graduates now. Now, it's a question of money. How do we strengthen the basic education? I think we need to advise government to re-examine the move it made to grant so-called universal access to quality education. Unfortunately, it focused just on universal access, but there was no support for raising the quality of tertiary education. I think that has to be terminated, and with the money being committed to that exercise, the basic education can get this money and the quality in our basic education eventually raised. The other syndrome that I have observed, having worked with government and through UP to being in the administration of UP, is this idea of X divided by N. There is no selectivity at all in many of the things we do. It's very evident, for example, in the number of SUCs we have. And if CHED will not hold the line, each congressional district will have an SUC. And with that proliferation of public universities, the quality eventually suffers because the funding available will not be sufficient. I think there has to be selectiveness in getting people admitted to college. And then from among those in college, we identified the most highly qualified, and they should be supported with government funding for further studies, either here or abroad. And for, that has been the approach in the past. Remember when the Americans first came here, there was a dearth of expertise. So they selected a few highly qualified people and sent them over to the US for advanced studies. And when they came back, they became the leaders in the country. I think something along that idea would be helpful in addressing the shortage of talents and expertise in the now emerging and challenging fields in our society. Now, President Emil referred to the proliferation of the centers of excellence as recognized by CHED. This is again part of that syndrome, of the lack of selectiveness. I think there's so much political pressure to recognize so-called centers of excellence, creating SUCs, okay, that people or the officials who should be holding the line are not able to impose on the need for being selective and the imposition of higher standards, for recognition. Otherwise, we end up with so many so-called SUCs, so many centers of excellence, but they're not really contributing much to the needs for innovation and creativity in our country. So I think if we need to come up with an idea that we will have to promote, it is that idea that there has to be selectiveness, and that necessarily there will be people who will be given more support because they're qualified, and sorry for those who will not be given support because they have not met the mark or the standards. I've seen this very clearly, like in this, when we were introducing the performance-based bonus in the government, and in that particular case, UP, there were rallies, and people were insisting on whatever is the pie for bonus that should be divided equally among all the employees. No, that kind of mentality has to change. We need to be able to identify the highly qualified, develop them fully, and they will serve as the locomotive or locomotives, a few of them, that will pull the train of development in our country. Otherwise, we'll all be competing in a downward spiral, because resources are being depleted and wasted by allocating them to those who do not deserve support. We cannot develop the whole country at the same pace at the same time. We cannot develop universities. How many universities do we have? More than 3,000 or more than 2,000 universities, mostly private, but of course there are SUCs that are also not developing very well because the budget is spread out, over so many. So there has to be selectiveness, strengthen basic education, and that's where most people should be going to. Be selective in admission in college. If the private schools cannot be controlled fully, then SUCs have to be controlled so that admission is limited. And but the quality should be raised, to a level that is globally competitive, and it should produce the required expertise we need. There is a need to focus. So selectiveness, focus. We have to focus on certain selected areas of expertise for which we need to develop. We cannot be experts in all scientific fields or in all technological fields. And that should be the approach. Selectiveness, focus, and recognizing those that can be developed as locomotives that will pull the country towards progress. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So from Dr. Padolina and Dr. Pascual, we heard potential strategies that the country can take in terms of essentially achieving competitiveness in different sectors as well as in the global market. For Dr. Padolina, as well as for Dr. Pascual, there is a need to select priority areas, and we can talk about what these areas are. Perhaps we can consider the fourth industrial revolution that is already in our midst. We should also be talking about perhaps agriculture again, and going back to our base sector, economic sector. But before we go to that, I wanted to discuss with everybody, and the advantage of having a smaller group like this is that we can really distill each and every topic, with all members of the Zoom meeting being able to contribute. I wanted first to go into one of the topics that actually Dr. Pascual and Dr. Pernia mentioned, and that is developing our primary and secondary S&T programs. Siguro yun muna. And let's discuss that in a bit more detail, but I should also mention that the planned Fireside chat, the next one, will be all about this particular topic. And so if it's okay, may I call on Chris and Marivic to talk more about your experience with developing a better S&T program for our primary and secondary schools, knowing fully well that we're educating millions and millions of people, and a part of that education is making sure that they are encouraged to take on careers in S&T in college. Dr. Brenido?
Yeah, I actually want, yeah, okay. First of all, can I just ask a question before I answer your question?
Sure.
I would like to take this opportunity, since the two former science ministers are here with us this morning. Is Dr. Javier? Yeah. I wanted to ask them if, in their experience while they were heading the DOST, if there were occasions, and how frequent was this occasion of returning money from money given to DOST, which has to be returned to the national government at the end of the year, and if this was done, and probably how frequently, and what would you think is the reason for that?
Dr. Javier, do you remember during your time when part of the budget of DOST wasn't actually utilized? I guess that was the question of Chris, no?
Of course not. No, the problem really is the amounts are not really big. And also the problems emanates with the Congress and DBM. The problem now is the bulk of the money. Before there were not much money. It was only after when VAT was passed 2 years before the end of the GMA when there was more money. But before that, all the agencies didn't have much money. But the problem now is there's money, but they will be releasing in October, November. How can you intelligently and spend the money? And also, because of these problems with Napoles and all those NGOs, many of our technocrats have become gun shy. they're very particular on the procurement, processing, and auditing processes. And they would not dare take risks. And that's the explanation why there's so much money that are being returned now. But during our time, there was not much money anyway. And the money was being released on time. Pero ngayon, maraming pera, but they are released in October, November. How can you really intelligently spend the money? Worse, the audit system has become really, I don't know the adjective to
Too strict. Yeah.
too strict.
Yung
And
COA.
the bureaucrats became gun shy. They would not take risk anymore.
How about you, Dr. Padolina? What was your experience then?
You're muted, sir. Dr. Padolina.
Sorry. I think we did. We did have occasions when we had to return money. And that's because the part of it would be, even if we had calls for proposals, some would not fit the quality of proposals that we were willing to fund. And second, of course, you have a very hyper-regulated environment, COA, DBM, etc., and all these restrictions that, you know, by the time you're able to decide whether you complied with 10,000 different requirements, the year must already have passed, and therefore you have to return the unused funds. I think, if I may be asked, we need a separate set of guidelines for financial management and accountability for R&D and the universities. If we are using public money and giving them to both private and public universities. The bottom line, in my view, is to empower the researchers. We need to empower the researchers. We need to increase their level of discretion, because they need to have that elbow room for them to be able to exercise their creativity to the fullest. It's just like requiring an artist whom you commission with government funds to buy this kind of a paint to finish his work, because it's the lowest cost of oil paint. You know, I don't see any difference between that creativity and of an artist and that of a scientist. Anyway,
so
thank you.
So management, that's a management. Well, it's the bureaucracy that's the problem. But to the point of Dr. Javier, it was actually only during the second half of the Aquino administration, Noynoy Aquino's administration, wherein DOST had a bigger jump in budget. And prior to that, there was really not much to go around.
TP, may I just...
Yes, sir, very quickly. Yeah.
In this regard, you know, how COA has become dysfunctional when it comes to creativity in our research activities, or the terms of giving the way to our scientists. You know, take for example, UP has always, you know, during my time, the time I was there, we were getting significant amount of funding from DOST and from other sources for R&D. And there was one, or there are a few situations where the planned research has not turned out to be successful. And then COA is insisting to see in the report of the researchers those things that they have committed to produce. But it's a failure. So I always say that based on this experience and many others, the university doesn't look like the right place for innovation. You know, it has no, because of the dysfunction of certain government offices that are looking over the work of the university, like COA, yes, for example. They don't know what experiments are and what research is. You know. And they're expecting, like in any other activity, if there are steps outlined in the proposal and there are expected results, they will hold you to those steps and to those results. So no leeway for failure and no leeway for changes.
Your points will be echoed by Giselle and Ino and Arnel about the issues of procurement. But before we go on, let me just...
Excuse me. May I add before we leave that?
Again, let me just welcome to our Zoom meeting, Father Ben Nebres. Hi, Father Ben. Thank you for joining us. I'll call on you to give your 10-minute speech or lecture after this round of discussion. So I'll call on Dr. Javier and then go back quickly to Chris and Marivic. Go ahead, sir.
The problem of procurement of scientific supplies and equipment was partly solved in Los Baños when we established the Central Scientific Supply House, where items, supplies, chemicals, which are commonly used. So that would constitute maybe 70 to 80% of the expenditures are really recurring requirements. And so we had a Central Scientific Supply House. So all you have to do is go there and sign a supply issue voucher, then you have it. But I don't know for what reason the university stopped doing that. So we have a Central Scientific Supply House. We procure supplies a quarter or two ahead in bulk at most favorable prices. But I don't know why, for some reason, the UP stopped that concept of Central Scientific Supplies House, which was established by my predecessor, Bel Samonte in LB. But I don't know why this was stopped by UP and why the other government agencies are not adopting that.
We are actually trying to revisit and solve that problem. Dr. Al Serafica is actually at the forefront of fixing the procurement issue starting in UP, but that's a whole new topic. And I wanted to go back to Chris and Marivic about human capital development at the primary and secondary level, which I am sure will also be echoed by Father Ben, with us being one of the main issues as to why our S&T sector is not fully developed. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I would just, because I consider myself as a foot soldier. I'm out there in the trenches, and I'll also say why a little later. But before anything else, I would like to link up with what Secretary Pernia mentioned. I like the term, the life cycle, because for me, people have always been talking about the weakness of our basic education, elementary to high school. And I have, being here 100% immersed, I have really seen the causes of the weakness, at least majority of them. And I think at this point, since Giselle was mentioning we should, and Joel was also, were mentioning, we should have some doable tasks, because we would like to see numbers and we would like to see improvement in the numbers. And so from experience, the first step, at least what we did, I'm speaking from experience, we identified the pitfalls or the loopholes, the pitfalls or the weaknesses in the chain or in the life cycle. So, and then if we are able to discretize, because right now we just say elementary education, kindergarten, and then elementary, grade 1 to grade 6. And then we say, okay, junior high school, grade 7 to grade 10, senior high school, grade 11 to grade 12. And these are just bulk. But for us, we need to discretize further. Because, for example, from the psychological point of view, kindergarten is very different from grade 1 to grade 3. And between grade 3 and grade 4, there is a transition. And this is observable, especially in how children learn mathematics and science concepts and their approach in answering questions. And then 4 to 6, quite close to grade 7, but we have observed from almost 20 years now in secondary education, there is again a very significant transition between grade 8 and grade 9, and then again between grade 10 and grade 11. So there is a reason, for example, why much more, more children do very well in math contests, much more at the elementary level, considering our educational curriculum, than in the high school, which is quite rare, although we are now doing well in the IMO. So anyway, so I would suggest more discretization, more smaller, and then once we are able to actually discretize, then we assign people to very domain-specific tasks. That's my proposal from experience. Because I remember, because Professor Pascual is here in management, I think you have this scientific management where they did, at the turn of the century, these time and motion studies. And that was very effective in cutting down costs of production, costs of rendering service. And so we do this domain-specific task. And for that, I think this is a chance, because right now, after almost, so many years, the DepEd, the Department of Education, is finally linking with us in terms of sharing the learning activity sheets that we do in our school, in our dynamic learning program, which is very suitable for pandemic conditions, even beyond. So we focus on independent learning. We prepare these learning activity sheets, but actually the ones who compose the activity sheets are our regular teachers. And before we are able to share them on the large scale, because when you talk about DepEd, you're talking about millions of school children. And right now, talking about lack of manpower, I am the only one now in the final editing process checking, and if there are gaps, I am filling the loopholes. And when only high school teachers are the one preparing the LAS, you can imagine the lack of maturity in subject matter expertise and in pedagogical strategies. So,
Maribek, quick question. In the entire problem, what do you think is most critical? Is it the lack of equipment, scientific equipment, laboratory? Is it the materials, or is it the teacher problem? What is the big problem?
Sorry, no to all. Lack of facilities is not a problem. We have shown that. Lack of qualified teachers or training of teachers is not a serious problem. Lack of internet connectivity, lack of electricity, lack of phones, lack of whatever, it's not a serious problem. What is the key in our solution, which I think the DepEd will now be sharing, it's the composition, the design, the conceptualization, and the implementation or the accomplishment of the what we call as learning activity sheets. These are, there are many modules and learning resources online, but in our cases, the LAS, that's learning activity sheets, are designed for children to accomplish without any introductory lecture. So teachers only do validation. So the things that people always invoke to get more funding, we are saying no, they are not necessary. You can spend the money on health services. You can spend the money on agriculture. But in education, we can do so much even without funds. But what we need would be brain power. And that's why I'm reaching out to PAASE retirees. Maybe if you have papers, because for example, in senior high school, they have a subject, English for academic and professional purposes. And so they have English used, or academic text used in agriculture, in the ICT, in the humanities, in the arts, in sports. And of course, if you use text, you have to have, you might have copyright issues of, so if PAASE members have articles there or papers which you would allow us to use for these specialized courses in senior high school, that would be a big help. And now
So
one more thing.
So it's the curriculum and how the subjects are taught. That is what we want to focus in.
Yes,
and,
we should.
And there is some good news, as you mentioned, that DepEd is now a little bit more open. Lalo na, I think the problem in DepEd is that they're all teachers. And and they feel threatened when scientists and mathematicians come into the primary and secondary education teaching.
That is true. That is true. That's why I had to get my license in teaching, so they would
Yeah.
at least give me the benefit of a doubt. But regarding the curriculum also, I have been always open about this. The shift to the spiral curriculum completely weakened put our students at risk of very low educational outcomes. And the serious problem there is they had it legislated. It's in the Constitution now. It's a part of a Republic Act. Before, it used to be discipline-based. Well, historically, they had discipline-based meaning first year high school, you have earth science, second year biology, third year chemistry, fourth year physics. And you could spend 1 hour lecture for that, why it is so. They shifted to the spiral curriculum in the 70s and early 80s, and then numbers went down. And so they shifted back to discipline-based, and then now again, they went back to spiral curriculum, legislated it, and now we are all bound to follow it. And that is why personally, I have been having a very difficult time trying to satisfy as a good citizen, trying to follow, to comply with the requirements of DepEd, but at the same time, as a scientist, it is so obvious that the weaknesses in mathematics, in science, in the sciences could be traced back to that curriculum. So in fact, personally, I would propose decentralization. Not really, decentralization. Make it optional for those divisions.
We'll go back to that point. And thank you for sharing your own experience. And but at this point, I wanted to segue to from one educator to the next, and I wanted to hear the comments of Father Ben. If you're there, Father Ben, before you came in, Sec Pernia was actually mentioning the need for human capital development and looking at it at a life cycle, at the life cycle ecosystem, even starting with the nutrition of our children, even before they come to school. And I know that this is one of your advocacies as well as science education. So I'll give the floor to Father Ben. And if after Father Ben's lecture, anybody can chime in, just raise your hand in Zoom. Father Ben, you have the floor. You are muted.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, well, first of all, I agree on many of the points that we all raised already. Before I go to my main point, let me echo my concern, what Marivic said about the spiral curriculum. It's in a personal battle between myself in Ateneo and other educators who insist on the spiral curriculum. We went back to the discipline in 2000 with Senator Rocco when he was DepEd Secretary, because I recommended to him that we go back to the discipline base. But under Brother Armin, I actually wrote him that we should stick to the discipline, but DepEd decided to go with the spiral. I totally agree with Marivic that it is a serious problem for math, but even more a problem for science, and it's going to set us back years. So anyway, that point is made. I'd like to connect more directly with the recommendations, the possible things we can do that Dr. Giselle mentioned, and connect it with what we have to do in the earlier years, which Marivic and Chris have raised. First, I think we have to think much longer term. I think one of the big differences between our Philippine culture and say Vietnam or China or even Indonesia is they're able to think in 30-year, or in China's case, in 100-year terms. They actually have very long planning cycles. We cannot seem to think beyond the next election. So we think in 3-year cycles. And you cannot do that. You cannot do that in this case. So I agree with Chris and Marivic that we should begin from the beginning. And as you know, I keep saying that we can do whatever we wish with our schools, but if 30% of our children are already brain damaged because of malnutrition in the early years, that's already 1/3 of our population that would not be learning. So I do address that, but we are here on the education side. So what I would like to propose as a concrete step is to take at least one step down. And then from the proposal of Dr. Giselle about addressing manpower at the MS and PhD level, to begin at least with high school. At least in the case of mathematics, you have to begin at the very least at the high school level. If you don't do it well there, I think you have lost them. And so I think we have to invest in teachers who really can teach mathematics, and I would say the sciences, especially physics, well at the high school level. We cannot do it for all, but we could begin by selecting certain universities and then connecting them with the high school around them, and be responsible for training teachers that can really teach a good mathematics and science program in high school. And one of the biggest challenges is that I would say majority of Filipino teachers in math are afraid of doing real problems. I know problems which they don't know how to solve themselves. No. They are afraid of taking a problem and going to the class and solving it together with the class. They believe that they should know the solutions. No? But that's the difference between a real problem and an exercise. No? We do exercises, we don't do real problems. And in physics, as a Japanese friend told me, we do demonstrations, we don't do experiments. We have to have teachers at the high school level who are not afraid of doing problems they don't know and go through the process of solving them. In other words, if you want to develop people who have potential in mathematics or in physics, they have to be, I presume it's the same in chemistry or biology, they have to be able to really solve problems. That is not easy. It's a framework, it's a way of thinking. And that has to be developed. If you compare us with Vietnam, they are very, very good at this. They're very, very, I think we should stop connecting with the US. They're not very good at this except in the elite schools. We should really look, if you want to look at a country closer to us, look at Vietnam. So that's the first. There is a real need to invest in high school teachers who can really develop the talent there. It is too late to wait at the MS and PhD level. Why do I insist on this? Because in my own experience of running the consortium, running the ESEP and PICARI and the CHED committee on faculty development, the biggest problem we have about MS and PhDs, we simply don't have the stream. We don't have enough people who are prepared for it. Even if we gave out a lot of money, we don't have people who are ready to take it. We don't have the competence level, because that competence level has to have been developed at the undergraduate level and has to have been developed at the high school level, and ideally as well at the grade school level. I'm not totally sure that I agree with Marivic that we don't have to worry about the teachers. For me, it was a struggle with our own Ateneo high school teachers to really get them to do real problems, not to be afraid to do that. It really was a challenge with them to invite them to do the problems in the third International Mathematics Science Study and learn to do problems like that and to teach it to our students. I'm not so sure that that's so easy, no? I don't think you can do that just by following a syllabus. You have to, something has to be done in the way to kind of enter into your brain and get you to do that. So to summarize, we have to think longer term. I would, if there was a way that we can really think in at least 20-year terms, which is the time between the time a baby is born and maybe the time that he's kind of in junior, senior college, that would be fantastic. No? And then how do we get our system to not keep changing things, no? To implement seriously. And in the concrete, as I said, can we please invest in not just in MS and PhDs at the research level, but in really very good science and math teachers at the high school and preferably at the grade school level. If you look at China or look at Vietnam, their success owes to these teachers. We tend to only look at the researchers and the PhDs, but those researchers and the PhDs had very good grade school and high school teachers. I think we should study that cycle. We should really study that cycle and learn from them. So that's my main point, because I could recommend many things, but if we don't address that problem, we'll still be talking about this 20, 30 years from now. It will be the same problem. It's a little bit like we want to harvest the fruits of a tree, but we don't want to take the trouble of planting it and taking care of it. No? Or we want to have, like a family, we would like to have brilliant children, successful children, but we're not worried about taking care of them as babies and as teenagers. As a country, I'm not talking about individuals, as a country. I don't know if we are willing to do that, because I don't know whether we have the capacity as a country to think long term. In my own experience of working in science and technology in the country, every time we recommended something, people wanted to know what will be delivered by the time of the next election. If we have to get out of that short-term thinking. I would really urge, we have to find a way to get out of that short-term thinking. If we cannot do that, then I don't know. You can have all kinds of plans in these meetings, but they cannot be implemented, because real good plans can only be implemented over 10, 20-year cycles. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Ben. So just to summarize again what Father Ben mentioned, these are concrete strategies. Number one, longer term planning is required. If we don't have enough funds, then might as well invest in our high school teachers in terms of training. But to me, the glaring contribution of Father Ben this morning is in terms of how we change the mindset of how we teach science and math to our kids. Because like everybody in this Zoom room, we were all taught that science and math are exact sciences, that there is a solution to whatever problem is provided. And yet we have forgotten that what is more important than receiving or attaining the solution at the very end is the process by which we get to that solution. That is what I think was missing in how we teach science and math. No, the process. It's okay if you don't know how to solve it at the start, but you are given a set of skills. Is that correct, Father Ben? Nakalimutan na natin na yun yung mas importante than getting the solution at the very end.
We have to do.
Yes, go ahead.
As my friends in Japan and China say, we have to learn teachers to learn to teach real problems, not just exercises, and real experiments, not just demonstrations.
Point taken, Dr. Father Ben. May I call on Dr. Cuello and then followed by Dr. Ernie Pernia? Quick comments from you, Joel.
I'll do my best to be quick. Thank you. I just want to express my gratitude and appreciation for being part of this discussion. It's a real privilege to be part of, the circle where we have the elder statesman of education and even economics in the Philippines. So I've been away from the Philippines now for 32 years. So of course, what I'm imparting to you is my observations over the years, mainly from afar. And there are advantages to that, but there are also disadvantages to that. And so I'm relying on all of you to correct me if I am off. But I'd like to be candid in my sharing so that hopefully it would be beneficial. And I'd like to go back up higher again in terms of how we view human capital development. I appreciated some of the comments. Secretary Pernia said that it has to be comprehensive, from early childhood development all the way to postgraduate. let's see, Dr. Javier mentioned a mission-oriented research orientation, and Father Nebres, of course, emphasized the importance of long-term planning, which is really essential. But what I would like to contribute is that the human capital development in the Philippines really is not existing in a vacuum, but it's embedded in a certain paradigm, call it a business model, if you will. So back in 2000 to about 2009 or 2010, the president of the Philippines was Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. I'm reporting this to you. This is not passing any value judgment. At that time, she was emphasizing the development of personnel and workers in the Philippines for out-migration and for export. And in fact, she was hailing that the greatest export of the Philippines is its human workers. So that was a particular business model and a particular policy at that time. And, you know, it bore fruit because it really increased the remittances coming into the country. In fact, as of 2019, remittances going into the Philippines accounted for 9.3% of the GDP of the Philippines, and it amounted to about 33.5 billion US dollars. So that's significant. The only question is how much of that goes back into the training of, you know, workers and professionals. That's a good question. But of course, there's a downside to that, which is the dislocation of and disruption of families in the Philippines, because most of the parents were abroad. My take on this is that whether we're aware of it or not, this is still the reigning paradigm for human capital development in the Philippines. There's still that mindset, there's still that psychology or mind framework that the universities are training these professionals, and most of these professionals would be going abroad to get lucrative jobs. So I submit that that's still the reigning paradigm. But I believe, and my strong suggestion is that there is a need now to change that paradigm. So I label that paradigm as outward-looking, outward-oriented paradigm. It's now time for the Philippines to develop its inward-looking paradigm for human capital development. And that is to be able to retain them within the country so that they can use their talents to create value within the Philippines, which would then translate into export and so on and so forth. But the question is, how do you do that? So this really brings to the fore the fact that human capital development is inseparable from economics. Economics and human capital development are intrinsically, inseparably linked and connected. And so this is why it really is important for human capital development to be deliberately linked with industries in the Philippines. And Father Nebres emphasized, you know, the Philippine neighbors in Southeast Asia. And if you look at all of them, you will see that there is that explicit linkage of human capital development and industry. And part of that industry is driven by the global industry. It's not native, it's not local, at least at the outset, initially. They were attracting all of these global companies to set up shop in their countries, and explicitly as part of their policy to have this agreement with these companies to be able to help train local scientists and engineers, and then to be able to employ them. So in my heart of hearts, that's really what I would like to see happening in the Philippines.
Thank you,
and I would argue, last point, I would argue it's not a matter of chicken and egg, because if you look around in the Philippines, there are already global companies in the Philippines. One case in point is in the electronics sector. It's just a matter really of the government talking with them, negotiating with them, so that they would be hiring, you know, graduates in the Philippines. I think that's negotiable, as most Southeast Asian countries have shown and demonstrated.
Thanks, Joel. So
Thanks.
A change in paradigm in terms of looking inward instead of looking at the market outside, which what we have done so far, no, in the more recent past. Who better to ask about the linkage between economics and human capital development than Sec Ernie himself? Sec Ernie, do you want to chime in?
Yes.
A little bit, and then I'll call on Dr. Advincula afterwards.
Yeah, I'll comment on the comments of Joel Cuello and also Father Nebres. And this long-term vision, Father Nebres, actually we have a framework for that already. The long-term vision 2040, what we in Tagalog call ambisyon natin. And that long-term vision comprises 4 medium-term development plans, meaning 4 administrations. So if there's continuity from one administration to the next, and there's agreement on what the long-term vision ought to be among the upcoming the current and the upcoming administration, then we should be able to achieve that. And just getting your ideas into that long-term vision framework should be easy because it's already kind of functional. So that's one point. And then another point has to do with the point of Willie Padolina about, I think he was talking about getting back or attracting more scientists and engineers and S&T workers in the Philippines. As you know, when I was in NEDA, and the NEDA is in charge kasi of the foreign investment negative list. And when I was there, we had to transition from the 10th foreign investment negative list to the 11th FINL. And I made sure that the restriction on foreign faculty, foreign professors coming into the Philippines be removed from that restriction of the FINL, foreign investment negative list. And so that was approved with EO 65. And I don't know why UP is still not aware of that. And then that was EO 65 was signed October 28, 2018. This morphed into a law in 2019, the Transnational Higher Education Act. And so, that's RA 11448. And again, UP doesn't seem to be aware, or many universities still don't seem to be aware of this innovation. So we are really now free to associate ourselves with foreign universities, Philippine universities, associating or having agreements with foreign universities, and also cross-country migration or visitation of professors. And this is what we need, because we really need, there's a gap, there's a deficit of these foreign S&T workers. And thirdly, I would like to also mention that it has to do with the point of Marivic, and yes, indeed, we should really start with the most basic education, even early childhood development, because we have this problem of 33% stunted children. And as mentioned by Father Nebres, 1/3 of the population, and you are not going to be able to use them for, productive schooling if that problem is not addressed at the earliest.
Thank you, Sec Ernie, which is a good segue to inviting everybody to our third fireside chat of PAASE, which will all be about developing our S&T curriculum and programs at the primary and secondary level so that they all feed into our college and even graduate programs. One thing that Dr. Pernia also mentioned is the role of our universities and even developing our graduate programs. And And I wanted to call on Dr. Advincula, who had a vast experience both abroad and now here in the Philippines working with DOST in terms of what are the strategies, Gobet, that we can take so that we can develop our graduate program as a start. Go ahead, Gobet.
Thank you so much, CP, and magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. It's about 9:45 p.m. here in the US, and I'd like to thank Giselle also for reminding me, alerting me. And most of all, I really appreciate the opportunity and thank you all. You know, I feel like I'm with the Hall of Famers sa Philippines, interacting with you. But anyway, I'll give my 2 cents, and I really appreciate all the comments and the wonderful insight, experience, and also real things, contributions that all our heroes have done here. My 2 cents is this: it's really at this point, it's really we're trying almost everything that was suggested. And with regards to limited resources, of course, they come and go. And like what Father Nebre said, sometimes it's really goes from one administration to the other, unfortunately. And we of course, try to shield that by making the program sustainable. But what I can say from my experience and also suggestion is that I have consistently trained PhD students, mostly since 20 years ago. And to my count, about 25 of them, some have returned, a good number have returned to the Philippines, and some of them stayed here in the US. And in fact, just this morning, I'm facilitating the visit of an ERDT fellow to University of Tennessee. By the way, I just moved to another institution. I recently got a governor's chair position at the University of Tennessee and Oak Ridge National Lab. So I don't know how that will go in terms of my involvement in the Philippines. But of course, I'm committed, and I hope to continue and invite more. So the thing is, be consistent, have a vision. I have worked with DOST directly recently with the Additive Manufacturing Center, actually with CP for a while. We were training together people from the Philippines, different universities on additive manufacturing. But even for a long time, I was hosting a lot of DOST, CHED fellows, ERDT fellows to get their PhD with me. You know, they would stay for a year or sometimes a year and a half to get their research work done. And the key to that was to partner with these different programs, offering my lab as a host institution to accelerate doing research so that they can overcome things like procurement or a lot of teaching load by giving them that concentrated effort. And so far, I would say that has been the key to success, to not only them getting PhDs, but also contributing back to the Philippines, getting a lot of publications and training. So I would say when real estate, when they say location, 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 really when we try to incentivize students to go to higher education, it's market, market, market. And the reason I say that is when people invest their time, their talent, and hopefully they get their treasure from a sponsor or the Philippine government, is they want to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Ano ba yung employment opportunities nila, and what opportunities will they have when they get their degree? You know, sometimes it's really to come to the US to get a degree and maybe stay here. But a number will return to the Philippines because they have to or they want to. But then they have to face the question that, will they be gainfully employed? The basic thing, and were there opportunity for advancement? So what I would say is with all the locators coming to the Philippines, companies, with the universities, at a certain point, there still is a big need, but it will also cap. One of the best ways is really to train our R&D people to be more entrepreneurial. What I mean by that is entrepreneurial in terms of their employers, meaning when they work for a company, be the best to develop new products or help develop markets through R&D, or incentivize them to start their own companies. For example, many companies who locate in the Philippines, their need really is not just incentives in terms of taxes, but they're really looking for people to hire or companies to be part of their supply chain. So if we have many business people who would partner with the right R&D people to develop the right product for the supply chain, that could be a good reason to hire the best people who can do R&D. The other is manufacturing. If we
Thanks, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be wrapping up soon.
Okay.
So what my point is, there's enough goodwill, there's the mechanism, there's funding, but at the end of the day, we have to help define the future and employment possibilities for our graduate students.
Thanks, Gobet. I think the main point that I got from you were saying is that if there is no opportunities currently for a master's in chemistry or a PhD in chemistry, then you create the environment where they can actually self-employ themselves through entrepreneurship. And this is also the point of Dr. Javier earlier, of creating centers of excellence, not in terms of the CHED COEs, but in terms of making sure that whatever research are able to churn out, that these get commercialized or used by the industry. I'll call on Dr.
CP, can I just make one last connection? I really appreciate the Bernidos, their commitment to primary and secondary education, because it really starts there. To have a lot of pool for undergraduates to graduates, you really have to start them young. And a number of us who are products of science high schools, that training at that early age really made a big difference. So my hat's off, and more power to that type of endeavor in our country.
Thank you.
And from all of us, of course, Chris and Marivic, we appreciate all the effort that you are doing. The other side of using S&T workers in the universities for commercialization and for technopreneurship is actually using them, training them at the most basic and fundamental sciences. And this is the point of Dr. Salvador in the Zoom group chat earlier, that there is also that requirement from the industry of these people who have that foundation of, for example, physics or chemistry. So I'll call on Dr. Salvador if you're ready, but in the meantime, whoever wants to chime in, I'm sure Al has a lot of things to say about strategies, concrete strategies that we can take. Just raise your hand if you want to.
Just a very quick point, CP.
Sige, Sec Ernie.
Yeah, I forgot to mention about what Joel Cuello mentioned regarding the inextricable link between industry and government, public and private sector, because we really have to ramp up this public-private partnership, because the government really is not able to do the right things. I mean, they can only do so much, and sometimes wrongly. And the thing about feeding the output of science and technology into the industry, that will further incentivize them into contributing to the Human Development Fund that I was mentioning earlier.
Agree.
So the incentive is not just the tax deduction for those private companies contributing to the fund, but also this the use. What is it for us? So there's something for them in terms of what S&T can do.
Of course. In fact, when you were mentioning that, I'm also No, personally, I wanted to go into another topic, which is also very interesting personally, and that is strengthening our agriculture research, and not just looking at industry per se, but agriculture needs to get a boost in its arm, and that can be done through R&D, and we've forgotten it because we've all been focused at industrializing, where in fact agriculture is still our main base. So I'm sure Dr. Javier, Al, and Dr. Padulina would echo the same thought, no? That there's that niche that we can pursue. Yes, of course.
Okay.
Agriculture is part of the industry. Thank you, Menchi. But what we are talking about industry is the more high-tech industries, and we somehow leave behind the agriculture sector.
CP?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Dr. Salvador.
Okay, quick doable comments. No, while we would like to have research done, funded research to be so-called commercialization, I'd like that to be validated, because my dealings with the semicon company is that they would not like to have people trained in that. They always say, we can always outspend you in doing the commercialization. What we need are good people grounded in basic science. Joel is here. I've dealt with Maxime. They've always asked me, can you give me at least 10 MS? If I do that, my group would be depleted. I've done that with SunPower. I gave my best students to them. These were already doing their PhD, but I said, the timing it's bad. We have to support them, otherwise they will leave. I gave my best students to SunPower. I gave my best students to Maxime, but they want 10. And I cannot produce 10 if I would come up with a DOST project that is asking, can you commercialize this in the next 2 years? And for these people, that's not what they're after. What they're after is anybody who's good in statistics, we will get them, because we need that for our reliability. Anybody who's good in chemistry, no matter what field, we will get them, because it's still the basic science. So maybe just to have a revalidation of these things, that when we focus so much on our commercialization, let's look at the people that we have. Our people were trained. We have people coming from TIT. We have people coming from Japan. I was there in 2009, and I talked to them about the possibility of going back to the Philippines. These are young people. And I told them, look, the salary has gone up. That is attractive for you. The funding has gone up. But when they came home, they said, we're being forced to do something on natural products. That is not our call. So we are being put in a tight spot where apparently there is no validation of what the industry needs. Second point, agriculture, Dr. Javier, I think we could work with SHED, because when these nicer centers were put up, the initial funding was too small, 50 million. These nicer centers of DOST, they're good in inclusivity. It's done outside. Most of them are in agriculture. But what we need is really advanced labs, maybe require them to have all of those high school students within that area work in that nicer. But 50 million is not going to do. With the Picari, the funding was something like 150, 100 million. Maybe that's the way to do it, because that is the one that will incentivize people, younger ones, to say, I'm going to go to the province. I'm not going to start my career in Manila, because there is a laboratory there. Maybe there's a more value for my life when I look at it 60 years down the road. But that's the way. The funding has to be bigger. And you cannot have 12 centers, 24. Ang sinabi ko sa kanya dati, don't concentrate in 24 how many regions we have. Just pick six of the best, put all your bet there. And then everybody will be, and just, how did they get that? Because they put their time, they put their effort, the university put everything to work there so that the next batch can get the same amount of money. That's one way of helping the agriculture center. I think the NICE is the one that will boost the R&D centers of that. For the MA, for the secondary, yes, we have realized, teachers are bad in high school. So what we have done, at least in cooperation with the US, is finally they have agreed to fund MA, kasi dati MS lang eh. Now, requirement namin sa MA, wag manggaling sa science high school. They have all of that. Kailangan dapat manggaling sa national high school kasi mas malaki yung coverage. We do not, the science high school have very good teachers. But if you look at the profile of those who are doing the PhD, they're not coming from from Philippine science. They're coming from the national high school. Maybe because those in Philippine science would like to go to the medical field. But there is a program right now.
Point well taken.
We're hoping that
Arnel.
everybody will take that. No, now there's an MA program. Paki-blast na lang sa ibang schools.
Thank you.
That's my point.
Point well taken, Arnel, about satisfying the need of the market. No, for both. Actually, I don't think they're competing. No, they need these strong people in the fundamentals of physics and math and so on. But there's also that requirement. I'm sure this is what Al wants to say. No, in terms of the need of the industry and technopreneurship and so on. So you have 2 minutes, Al.
Okay, I'm very quick. Thank you very much for all our speakers. We will be calling on you guys. I have 3 lead efforts that I've been doing, as you well know, on technology commercialization and technopreneurship. Arnel, I'll have a good conversation with you about the validation in a separate event, I guess. But again, Sec Ernie and I and Joel are all about the ecosystem building, to similar to what Dr. Javier has proposed for the Stanford ecosystem. Again, our own localized ecosystem that really works with the right people and the right ingredients. Indeed, on the procurement side, we've been doing this effort on opening it up for scientific equipment for the last 6 years. President Pascual was part of that effort when we were in UP. USAID Stride has been providing us with support as well for both funding. And I will be calling on, of course, Secretary Willie Padolina has been very good inputs on that one. The key is for us to be able to do procurement by objectives for S&T, starting with equipment. That's the main thrust. And the last part is, of course, our effort in being industry linkages. And again, it all starts with being able to have viable technology base, that's basic research, and going into advanced research and going eventually to commercialization and product development. We've been training on this. We have I-Core models that we've been using. US has funds $6-7 billion a year. They've implemented this program the last 10 years, the Innovation Core. We're replicating it here for the last 3 years. And we've trained about only 25 companies so far, but eventually what we will hope is to mimic. They train 1,000 companies. They raised over $500 million already on those trained teams. Again, it's team training. I'm not asking scientists to become entrepreneurs. We need to build teams of industry, marketers, and salespeople around the scientists to be able to market the technology. That's the model, not making scientists or members of PAASE become successful entrepreneurs. But in the process, the team training will create. So to me, that's it. I will be calling on you.
It's an ecosystem.
Growth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's an ecosystem.
And on the last support. Correct. So it's ecosystem building support. I'm a supporter of that. On the growth stunting and nutrition, I'm a supporter of that. I'm not going to lead that as well. On STEM education, I'm on the board of Unilab STEM. Marivic and Chris, I will try to propose that. And on USAID, there's the TESDA project for TechVoc for second education as well. I will try to help on that as well, but as support. But the lead.
Thank you,
those
Al.
3. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. I just wanted to give an opportunity for Father Ben. I believe Father Ben needs to leave already, and maybe perhaps you can say a few parting words about the comments that you've heard so far. Go ahead, Father Ben.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I have to go to another event. I just want to say that I do agree with all the points being made about commercialization, and I've worked in that. But I want to repeat, and I think this was clear from Arnel, that we just don't have enough people. As he points out, anybody he has is already absorbed immediately. And that really stems from the fact that we have a very weak stream coming from grade schools, high schools, and college. I also want to point out that it's very important to work with the public school system, because in studies that have been done in Australia and in the West, traditionally those who are going to science and stay with science and math come from the lower middle class. As Arnel points out, the better off middle class, please, in the Philippine science many of them will go into medicine and law and business. So it's also a culture thing. And so we really have to invest in the stream that will feed into the science and technology track. So anyway, I've said it often enough, but unfortunately, as I said, we haven't really addressed it. And so while all the things that we are planning at the island are important, when we have to get for government funds, I think the bigger problem is the human capability, whether we have the people who can do it. So thank you again. I have to go to another event and appreciate very much this event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father Ben. And we'll make sure that we invite you in the next Fireside Chat on the primary and secondary. Yes. Thank you, Father Ben. Okay, if it is okay with everybody, we will extend our Zoom meeting up to 10:15. So we have 11 more minutes. I believe, sino ba yung nagre-raise ng hand kanina? Marivic, yes, of course. And Joel and Ino, were you raising your hand earlier? Sige, quickly, Marivic, you wanted to react on something? Go ahead.
Yeah. Hopefully, quickly, very quickly. Number one, it's always so sad for me to hear that people keep saying we lack people, we lack human resources. When we have around, this is a rough estimate again, around 27 million in basic education alone. And so when you're talking about numbers, we have far more numbers than Singapore. And it's really just how we educate them. So I would also like to, Father Nebres has left. I'm happy that we agreed about the discipline-based curriculum. If somebody could sponsor the discipline-based curriculum, or if the government wants to maintain the spiral, then at least give freedom to other divisions or other schools to go for the discipline-based, then it would be a big help to help us work with the 27 million young people in our country at present and get returns within 5 years or so. And then the next thing that I would like to say, and this is one thing that I disagree respectfully with Father Nebres and with many of you, if we continue to emphasize the training of teachers, ask for budget for the training of teachers, we are dealing with an unstable equilibrium, which means that we might have more trained teachers, but in the end, we lose out because globally, market forces will really overwhelm us. So we have to design programs, and that is what we did with our dynamic learning program. We designed a program which would not be heavily dependent on teachers. Training of teachers is budget intensive, technology intensive, energy intensive, and then they just go out. Only a few would really return. And so it's unstable. And so we feel we are scientists. We can innovate. We can design programs that would be not heavily teacher independent, especially now in the 21st century. There's technology. There are just too many online educational resources. Because if we continue emphasizing that, it will be an endless cycle. And there will always be something to blame. Our attitude, Chris and I, for example, we don't want to blame anybody. We just want to do something and get numbers, real numbers, and then get a graph that goes up with a stable increasing trend, sustainability. So that's all I wanted to do. The curriculum,
yes,
and then teachers.
And then the teachers. Okay, I will digest all of that. Being a school owner myself, yung teacher factor is really huge, at least in the traditional sense of how we train our kids. That the teacher factor is very critical. Thank you, Marivic. Joel, you wanted to say something quickly?
Yes. Very quickly, this is pertaining to agriculture in terms of human capacity building. Agriculture remains crucially important for the Philippines because it employs still a little over 25% of all workers in the Philippines. But sadly, it contributes less than 10% to the GDP of the Philippines. So this calls attention to the need to create value, more value within the sector of agriculture. But how do we do that? And how do we promote inclusiveness or inclusivity among the workers in that sector? So one is, and I saw this in Leyte, is really to empower the farmers to form associations, because individual farmers or family-sized farmers, it's going to be very hard for them really to compete in the market. And again, we have to approach this with a market lens because agriculture is a market. And so we have to empower the Filipino farmers, not just in terms of science and technology, not just in terms of innovation, which by the way are extremely crucial, but we have to empower them in terms of organizing themselves to become competitive entrepreneurs and companies. And this is what I've seen in Leyte. They have farmers associations. The governor helped link them to, capital, to training, science and innovation, and more importantly, to market. And so now they really are thriving. And it's a success story.
So Joel, creating value in agriculture through R&D, no?
Absolutely, yes.
We have the experts here in the Zoom room, in the person of Dr. Javier, Dr. Ino.
Absolutely.
So,
right. And so the question now is being able to take advantage of those innovations. Right, taking advantage of the fruit of that world-class R&D and translate it into the marketplace. And that really is a matter of, business. It's a matter of learning how to organize themselves as a business.
Okay, agree. Dr. Javier or Ino or Dr. Padolina? Dr. Padolina first, sige.
Nakamute po kayo.
Nakamute po.
Yes, first, I don't know if we realize that the growing impact of online courses is really a threat to the existence of our universities. What if Wharton decreases its tuition fee so that you can very easily get an MBA from them online? And many other opportunities. In fact, if you look at other ASEAN countries, foreign universities are establishing campuses in their particular countries. So that's one. The second point is that I think agricultural research should not reside only in the colleges of agriculture. They should involve all the other disciplines, because at some point you will have borderline issues that will require basic research. For example, if we're looking at flavors and essences, you want to know what is the flavor factor, what is the compound responsible for that. I'm sorry, but the colleges of agriculture may not be able to respond to that. Assign that to a college of science or to a chemistry department. And if you want to look at markets, look at your College of Business Administration. In other words, it must involve other disciplines because the situation is very complex.
Pero UPLB is doing that already, di ba? Even if you're in the other departments, you're doing more agri stuff.
Yes, already. But as I said, UPLB cannot do it alone.
On its own.
What are the other state universities and colleges doing?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, if UPLB can be a model, then fine, but the other SUCs should also get into that.
Should also get.
Yes.
Yes.
And lastly, just on the market, and I go back to my suggestion that we get in people. I think even the existing salary scales in our universities, whether they're private or public, should be market driven.
Okay.
I mean, a dean of a college of medicine should receive a bigger salary than a dean of something,
Okay.
Otherwise, you will not get the quality that you need. So that's just a few thoughts to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Pero I think mataas na nga yung sweldo ngayon ng SUC professors and UP. Dr. Ino, were you raising your hand? And then I'll call on Dr. Javier.
Willie.
Yes, I would like to share to the group that what CAS is doing in UPLB. We have been offering for the past 20 years now the BS in Math Science teaching. And the idea is to produce quality teachers who will be handling this math and science courses in the high school. And because of the successes of that particular program, by next year, we are offering also the BS in social science teaching, because we noticed the distortion on how we teach history and other social studies courses in our high school. So that will be forthcoming. Let me also react, because you've been discussing interdisciplinarity. I was a product of that interdisciplinarity program we call Program on Environmental Science and Management, and Dr. Padalina was also part of that in the late 70s. The faculty development programs are actually, in the past, have been program-oriented, meaning there is a planned, continuing, sustainable faculty development program, but it's now missing. And I regret to say that, because the faculty, the junior faculty, is his or on her own seeking for university to accept him. Unlike before, where you have the Ford Foundation Faculty Development Program, where you have the ADAB, IDP in Australia. So I hope we can follow that program, and that will be more successful and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc Ino. Two final comments from Dr. Pascual.
Yeah. It just occurred to me hearing Willie talk about universities getting redundant, you know. It just occurred to me that perhaps we should not think in terms of the Philippines monopolizing the higher education of Filipinos, because there's so many in our country that we need to educate. And in fact, the whole world, the whole developed world is waiting for our people to get trained, because we are one of the few countries now producing babies, you know. If you look at the demographics, we have the youngest profile among the demographics in our region. In Southeast Asia, East Asia, we are the source. We will be the source of manpower. Then why should we monopolize the development and training, the higher education of our people? Korean universities are waiting for our students. Taiwan universities are waiting for our students. And then there are electronic means of delivering higher education. Let's avail of all these possibilities and educate quickly with high quality level of education all our people, you know, who need to be trained, and let us be the researchers and scientists in the research institutes that Dr. Emil is talking about. We need
in other countries.
They need not be educated in the Philippines, you know.
Okay, that is actually the strategy of
it's something we need to pursue. I mean, it's an idea that just occurred to me hearing what Willie was talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pascual. Yan yung strategy ngayon ng Vietnam, to just send all their students abroad, and then everyone goes back when their economy is ready. Okay, I think our time is up. I will turn it over to Ma'am Giselle again. Thank you everyone for participating. Obviously, kulang na naman yung time, but what we are doing differently in the fireside chats is that we are all taking down notes. Giselle and I are taking down notes and produce it as a paper, a draft paper, which we will circulate to everybody here. Thank you everyone, and I'll turn it over to Giselle.
Thanks, CP. CP has a class at 10, so he's already late for his class.
10:15. So I leave the meeting already. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, well, just a few parting words. Reminder, we have fireside chats every Thursday, and the next one will be on STEM education. And that will be co-hosted with Chris and Marivic. And we're hoping to get people like Gani Tapang and Mel Gomez, who are the inventors of Vicer. And hopefully also, Chris and Marivic, I will get Toto Oliveira to join us to talk about education in biology, okay, and chemistry. Because my own thinking is, while the dynamic learning system works and your LASs work, we're trying to help you develop the courses for biology and chemistry, which are very experimental and empirical. So starts with observation, which brings me to my point. So one of the centers of innovation in the world is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. Their logo is mens et manus, mind and hands. I would say hands and mind. So I'd like to emphasize that for us to learn science, we need to use our hands. But the hands, of course, are aided by instruments. Okay, so if you want to teach quantitative science, you need instruments these days. That's why I think there's an opportunity for Vicer. I might also invite the UP Engineering Foundation because they're now championing Vicer. And I'd really hope that you would work closely with Gani and Mel, your co-graduates of the National Institute of Physics, on this. Okay, and it starts in early education, because in early education, the first pedagogies, the methods are do and tell, show and tell. So do something with your hands, talk about it to your classmates and to your teacher. So I think that's so important, but problem also exists in high school and undergrad. The teachers are the ones afraid or incompetent to do the experiments. See, so our fear in Vicer is even the teachers will not know how to use the instruments. So that's very important. Now, I think on the other end of it, which is the industry end and the applications that are peculiar or unique to our country, I think that what President Javier and Father Ben Nebres said, find the niches. Obviously, it would have to be agriculture, aquaculture, marine sciences, fisheries, and aided by the new technologies, then you would be able to, first and foremost, solve the problem of poverty, hunger, malnutrition, which impacts mostly our children, which would be the ones you would have to take care of to produce our productive, efficient workforce. Okay, so I think with this, I think we've set a stage for many important ideas to write the paper in a way that is attractive and palatable to the people who can help us. And for this, I will really count on Ernie Bernia, who's already said that he will get his team of economics faculty in the UP Diliman School of Economics to help him. So thank you very much for this very, very stimulating discussion on a most important topic for our national development. Thank you and good night. And
thank you all.
Especially to our participants from the United States. Thank you.
Picture, picture.
Oh yeah, picture.
Okay.
Please.
Picture.
Okay, I'll take care.
Picture muna kayo.
Okay, I'll just do the. Okay, thanks for reminding me now. Screenshot. All right. Sorry, I just have. Can you please all put on your photos? Thank you. Okay. All right. I did a screenshot of this first screen.
Okay.
Thank you. I think the others have left. All right. Good night.
Right. Thank you.
So much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thursday.
Good job, CB.
Thank you.
Bye, Ido. Bye, Secretary.
Congratulations to all.
Thank you so much for your
Giselle,
Good job, Marivic.
your ideas, sharing.
Bye, Giselle. Talk to you
Bye,
later.
bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.